All right, recording is started. Cool. Thank you guys for joining. This is the Tampa Pardot community group. I don't think anybody on this call is from Tampa. That's fine, except me. At this point, it's kind of just a global group that I happen to be in Tampa for. Um, but um, there were like I kind of come up with topics as I see things online, like a post or something that I'm like, huh, that's I would go to that. I would see a demo of how that actually works. And I figure I'm like there might be at least a handful of people who might actually want to see that as well. So I reach out and see if people want to do it. And this is kind of how um, this session came to be, because Brandon had posted something on LinkedIn about a new tool that Cypress had developed, um, that leverages the external actions functionality that's still relatively new and not too well understood still. I reached out to Brandon to see if he'd be open to talking a bit about it, maybe doing a little demo if that's possible, and then kind of doing some Q&A. So with that, I will hand it over to Brandon to intro, and we can start rolling. So go ahead.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. And the first thing I'm going to do here is share my screen. So I do have, I'm going to try not to do a death by PowerPoint thing here, but just to help make sure that I stay on a flow and stay on track to give everyone the best information here, I am going to follow a presentation here. So, hey everyone, my name is Brandon Walton. I have been in the Pardot space for some time. I like to say I'm a bit of a Pardot hipster. Been using Pardot since before it was cool. So way back in the day when Pardot was a scrappy startup based out of Atlanta, and I was working as a vendor for Microsoft. You could use Pardot with things like Dynamic CRM, and that's what I initially used Pardot for. And then when Salesforce acquired Pardot, that's really what brought me into the whole Salesforce ecosystem. So I've been in ever since. So that was 2013, 14 time frame, and more and more I've just been, eventually became a certified admin, certified consultant, and now most of my work is primarily made up of Salesforce projects. So that's a little bit about my background. The purpose that we and said he reached out to me. I've been exploring things with the marketing app extensions feature. Have been building out some cool things, and just wanted to share that. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about what marketing app extensions are, hopefully demystify that a little bit, and then show a little demonstration of a tool that I've created. And what we're going to attempt to do together in this demonstration is do a full circle where we send an action out of Pardot. It goes into another system. Today we're going to use Zapier, or Zapier makes you happier. And then from Zapier, it's going to post back into Pardot using an external activity. And what the intent is that seeing something go out to an external action, go out from Pardot via an external action, and then come back in via an external activity, hopefully that triggers a lot of aha moments, so that as a group, as Pardot users, we understand in general what this feature is, what it's about, and the things that are possible with it. So that being said, we'll start out with what are marketing app extensions. And what I'll say is, to really understand marketing app extensions, you've got to take off your Pardot hat and really put on your Salesforce admin hat, like the new admin builder, or like the new email and landing page builder. It lives in Salesforce. It's effectively an object that lives in Salesforce, that we're going to leverage so that we can use those external methods inside of Pardot. So the way that I've defined it is a framework for connecting, and notice I say account engagement on my documentation. I'm doing the right thing. Connecting account engagement to external systems, third-party apps. Popular examples that they use are Zoom, webinar platforms, things that just don't connect to Pardot natively, where in the past we would use a connector or some kind of custom integration. The idea between these marketing app extensions is to create a framework so that we can connect to anything that has an API that allows us to connect to it. What it does is it's going to leverage, there's two things that you'll want to remember. It's going to leverage external activities, and process external actions. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those are here upcoming. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of a demo today, I guess, and just to kind of walk through where you set up your marketing app extensions and how they live, how they look, and how they feel. So the first thing is to create and configure a new marketing app extension. If you've never done this before, where you'll find it is by going up here to your admin cog. And what's really nice, if you haven't seen this already, I'm assuming most of us have seen this already, you can go to marketing setup. Basically, it's like having your setup, but it's only going to show things that are related to your marketing suite of services with Salesforce. So when I go to marketing setup, what you'll want to be able to find is marketing app extensions. I have found in working with some accounts that for some reason, in some instances, this doesn't exist yet. So if it doesn't exist yet, what you'll do is just open a ticket and they should be able to provision it for you. That way, you'd have to go through Salesforce support. I haven't found a way to turn this on without them yet, but maybe it's coming down the line. And then you can see what we have here is a list. It's very much looks like a Salesforce list. So far, I've created these extensions. Some of these are me just playing around with stuff, really. One of the things I've learned is I've done this more and more, is a good best practice is to make an app extension for each app
Hey,
that you're
Brandon.
connecting with. Yeah.
Sorry, would you mind increasing the zoom on your screen a bit?
Yeah, sure thing.
It's a little hard to read because you're in like full screen mode, and so
Yeah, I've
sometimes it
got
gets a
one
little.
of these wider monitors, so it might
Yeah,
affect
I
things.
have the
Is that a little
same.
bit better?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is
is
better.
that a little bit better? Okay.
Yes,
So
thank you so
hopefully this
much.
works. Yeah, and I could zoom in. So you can see we've got some marketing app extensions that I've created already. A best practice for doing these is for each service that you're integrating with, create your own, create its own app extension. Because within the app extension, that's where we're going to create different actions and activities and things that we want to track. So creating them is pretty easy. You're going to just give it a name. It's going to generate an API name, just like most of your other Salesforce objects. And then the key thing is you want to select active and automations. If you don't select active and automations, it's not going to work with anything inside of Pardot. So you'll give it a name, check the active and automations, give it a description. This is just for you and your team to recognize what it is down the road. And then you'll hit save to create a new one. I'm not going to create a new one here because we're going to use one of these other ones. So like Ben was saying, we're kind of demoing this Webhooks by Cypress. So I'm going to pop into this one that I've already created. You've created your app extension. Again, it's very much a Salesforce object. You can see we've got some field names, the extension name, the API name, and this checkbox and this description box. You could access this from Object Manager, and you might have to actually. As we look at the related list here, what you should see in your marketing app extension is 3 different related objects: a business unit assignment, which is first, an activity type, which was the first thing that was released as part of these marketing app extensions, and then the recent update provides the action types. Now, when I was setting this up for the first time, I was confused because I've read about action types. I didn't see the option here. What I actually had to do is go into Object Manager, look for an object called Marketing App Extensions, and then make sure that you're adding all of the related lists needed to here. So again, you really are putting on your Salesforce admin hat to get this working. But for me, when I understood, okay, this is an object that lives in Salesforce, and I had to add the action types to the related list here, then that was my first kind of aha moment. So in creating these, we'll pop back to the presentation because I think that's a good point for the present. So the first thing that you do, so after you create it, before you can do anything with these, you have to set up your business unit assignment. Depending on the level of Pardot that you have, this may be different for you. So business unit, think of it as like your org ID for the Pardot account. If you are using something like Plus and you only have one business unit, it's very simple. You go in here, you create a new business unit assignment, you'll only have one. And what that's doing is that's saying, okay, we're making this marketing app extension available for this Pardot business unit or this Pardot account. If you're on one of the larger SKUs and you've got multiple business units, you'd be able to select which business units you want to make your marketing app extension available for. And you can have more than one. So you can create like a Zoom webinar and have it available for 5 business units if you're in an organization that has multiple business units. Even if you have one, you still want to make sure that you set up the business unit assignment, because that's going to be the mechanism that makes your action types and activity types available from within that business unit. So for this one, we just have a single business unit. Very easy. We want to make sure we set that up so that these other 2 parts work up here. Next, we're going to talk about external activities, and we're going to talk about external activities because these were released first. They're a bit complicated. They were complicated for me to really understand what they're designed to do at first. And so I'm going to share some things that help me understand what they do and why they exist and better. So the aha moment for me was to understand or start thinking of the external activities as a way of importing activities that happen outside of the traditionally tracked inside of account engagement features. So inside of account engagement, you can track things like email opens, email sends, form completions, clicks, things like that. If you have one of the older connectors, you have the ability to pull in the connector information. So if they signed up for your go-to webinar, you'd be able to see that in there. What external activities allow us to do is all of the tools and features and new great things that have been invented since 2013, 2014, it gives us a special place to track those activities. So if you're looking at a prospect record inside of your account, what you're going to see is your standard Pardot activities at the top, and then the custom external activities on the bottom. And you can see here, this is just me kind of messing around with formatting different values and different updates into the external activities. But the idea is the external activities, when they happen, you're using the Pardot API to post them into this external activities channel. And you can use them with automation rules, segmentation rules, and engagement studio programs. So when you're using when you're using external activities, what it allows you to do is, let's say if a new external activity is created and the value contains webhooks by Cypress, boom, shakalaka, add them to the boom shakalaka dynamic list. That's the idea here. So for me, the thing that really helped me understand the purpose of external activities was understanding that external activities, the idea behind them is something is happening outside of something that we traditionally would be able to track in a Pardot activity stream, and allowing us to grab that or post that into Pardot activity into Pardot, and it's going to live in this external activities section. A little bit more about external activities, just understanding what they are, is it uses a Pardot API call to post the value into account engagement. So in the Pardot API version 5, there's an endpoint for external activities. And what you're formatting it in is something that looks a little bit like this. And we'll pop into the demo view here shortly. So when you're creating that activity type, so here we got some activity types. We've got this attended webinar activity type. Similar to creating your marketing app extension, all you're doing here is giving it a name. The API name is going to be generated, and you can add a description. That's all you're doing as a creator of these. What it's going to return is it's going to return this little JSON body here. And this, they even say, work with the developer. If you don't understand how this works, we'll add some more about that in a little bit. But the idea is you post to this API endpoint, and you're going to provide a little JSON body. You have to provide what the extension is. That's how it's going to find the activity type. The type of action, so this type of action is our API name. And then what's cool about these is you can give it any string. So if we go back to this demo here, or this example here, you can see in my example, I was just posting just kind of funny test values. So what it's going to appear like is it's going to come through to the webhooks, external activity in Zapier, boom shakalaka, or whatever value you have your system creating. If you're really going to be doing it with like a webinar tool like Zoom, for example, what you might do is you might have this be, rather than the type attended webinar, maybe it's webinar status or just webinar. And then in the value, you might post the ID of the webinar or the name of the webinar, followed by whether it was attended or registered or was absent. So it's very open, very flexible, and up to you to design. That can be good and bad, but we won't get into the detail here. The idea is this is the information that Pardot's API is going to be looking for. It needs to have an email. Email is going to be how it finds the right prospect to associate the activity to. And then what it's going to do with that is provide a value. One of the other fun things that you can do is you can force an activity date. So if you wanted to pass through an activity date for an maybe it's an activity that happened in the past, you can pass through an activity date. This is optional, and if you don't pass through an activity date, it's just going to timestamp it with the time that API was called, which is probably going to be the more likely way that you'll do this. So what's an external activity? Again, it's a way to grab something that's happening outside of your Pardot platform, pull it in, have it live inside of the external activity section in your Pardot account. It's leveraging the Pardot API. You're posting to this external activities endpoint, and you're going to give it, or have your developer give it a little JSON file. And we're going to demo that here more in a bit as we kind of just go through the groundwork of what all this stuff is. So I've got my activity type here, attended webinar, and we're good to go. I'm going to navigate back to my main extension and then go back to the related list. Notice that we also can have different activity types. So you might have more than one activity living inside of here. You have the ability to do that. So again, another layer of flexibility that you can have into your solution design. And I apologize, I am not checking the chat. I'll check the chat at the end and we can answer questions at that time. So to configure these, like we were saying, you could create a new activity type, just like creating a new record inside of Salesforce. All you're providing here is you're going to give it a name. So maybe this was registered for webinar. And I don't know if I would actually design mine that way, but if you were, you could have a registered, attended, absent, whatever you wanted to do. And then active in automations, you want to check this box to make sure that it's available inside of Pardot. And then you'll see when we save this here. So you just created this new one, registered for webinar. This post extension is going to be created already. So see, the type here is what changes. Same extension, a different type. And then again, we could pass through any string. So maybe we would pass through the name of the webinar that they registered for. And then a product spotlight here. There's actually in the App Exchange, if you put in flow actions for Pardot, Sercante has a really great app that's available. And one of the things that they've added to that app is add prospect external activity. What's nice about this is after you set up the application, you don't have to do all the development work like on your own server or on your own system. It'll leverage Salesforce to pass through everything that's required to create that prospect external activity. So this is something that's available in the App Exchange. I can send the link after I'm done presenting here. But the idea is now you can have something, maybe you have the Zoom for Salesforce integration. You could set that up. You could have a trigger anytime a new Zoom attendee is created. Use a flow to add that prospect activity into Pardot. That should make things easier for you so you don't have to go full on, developer mode when you're building out those external actions or external activities. Sorry, see, I'm new language for all of us. The next thing to talk about is the other type of thing that you can do with your marketing app extensions, and that is external actions. So again, unlike activities that are grabbing things that are happening outside of Pardot and allowing you to pull those in, what external actions do are really the opposite. So think of this as a way to initiate an action outside of account engagement or Pardot. So rather than another system posting into the Pardot API, what we're doing is we're taking an action. Think of it very similar to like a Salesforce Apex action to another system. So you can see this is a step in an engagement program. When the external actions are created, you've got the ability to add them here. Where I've had a really good success, and what Ben tapped me on the shoulder for is, again, it's WebhooksByCypress, which allows us just to send to another endpoint. Works really well with Zapier. So the idea is that action happens, and we can post that step or that prospect's information to Zapier when they hit a specific step. Some of the limits is you can only do 100,000 actions per day from an engagement from an external activity. So you can do 100,000 actions per day from a business unit. And really, when we talk about sending actions out, currently it's through an engagement program. So you can't use a completion action quite yet.
Hey, Brandon, 1 second. Sorry. It looks
Yep.
like there's some people are having some issues with, some people are not seeing the slides advance. Some people are
Oh,
stuck on the app extension page.
okay.
Okay.
Maybe I'll stop sharing and reshare. Would that help?
Yeah, that's fine. That's probably a good idea, just to reset the share. And for those that don't know, Brandon, we didn't get a chance to do an intro. So Brandon works for a company called Cypress Learning Solutions, and they do a lot of stuff in Pardot and also more deeply into Salesforce. Um, so if you want to do really quickly, I realize this is really random in the middle of your presentation, but I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to actually kind of like tell people who you are and who Cypress is.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, quick plug. We're a registered Salesforce partner. And yeah, Ben pretty much nailed it. We specialize in implementations and training. Our approach to it really is training first, more than just being a group of developers. So we really focus on things like boot camps and workshops and training to help folks implement and deploy solutions. Yeah, I'll keep it brief. And if you're interested in me, feel free to reach out and we can talk more about what I do. But yeah, I want to stay focused on the demo here as much as possible. But yeah, we're a
Yeah, that's
registered consulting partner, and yeah,
Yeah, so when it says Webhooks by Cypress, it's because Cypress
yeah,
Learning Solutions?
yep,
Is
we
that what
wrote Cypress Learning Solutions.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
that's
was
why it's called
written by us.
Cypress. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly right. So yeah, the Webhooks by Cypress. We'll get into that more here shortly. That's a solution that we wrote. It does a lot of really cool things, more than just this. This is just one of those things that well, we'll talk about it more here in a bit after we get through the rest of it. Um, all right, so let's go back to our marketing app extension. And so when we're talking about action types, when you create an action type, this is going to make everything make a little bit more sense. What's different about the action type from the activity type is what it's looking for is an invocable action. An invocable action is a special type of Apex class that you create that allows you to use the Apex class in Salesforce flows. There's special variables that we include in these invocable actions that allow a flow, or in this case, an action, an external action, to send data to it. So your Salesforce class can process things. Do Tampa test for the action name. Give it a description. We'll find the invocable action. So you can see here, these are all of the Apex actions that we have available inside of this Salesforce account. So Twilio has them. There are other solutions out there that have them out of the box that you can check out when you install those packages. The one we'll be looking at today is Webhooks by Cypress. And we created this package actually to be available for folks who are only on Pardot growth, to allow them to do selective syncing from Salesforce into Pardot. So the idea behind it, when we created it, was you're basically using form handlers on a flow, and that flow is sending data into Pardot via form handlers. So rather than having the default sync on that's syncing all the data, it will kind of trick your Salesforce flows, trick Salesforce flows to submit form data, which is the same as um, adding or upserting a prospect into Pardot. So this invocable action schema, this is just what's provided by the action here. So depending on what the Apex action that you're using in this step provides for you, it might have different properties than what are seen here. The property that we're using in ours is just this URL property, and it's going to allow us to create a URL to send information to. So in the demo today, we're going to use Zapier, and we're going to use that Webhooks by Zapier. And the idea is when someone goes to a step in our engagement program, we're going to send that data over to Zapier to process it, to add them to a webinar or whatever we want, Zapier or whatever third-party system it is. So depending on the invocable action that you're using or that you set up or develop, this might look different for you, but this is just letting us know, okay, you've got one variable that you can use for this thing. And again, we're going to click it to be active in automations. I'm not going to save it because we already have that here in these two actions. So you can see here's what it looks like once it's created. The invocable action schema. This is something that's created by a developer, if you will. And this is what we have access to, these properties. So what we're saying is we have a URL property, it's a string, it's a URL, and then whatever value we create inside of Pardot is going to be what gets sent into this value here. All right, so what is an external action? It works with an invocable class, invocable Apex class in Salesforce. So again, put your Salesforce admin developer hat on. It works if you've done anything with flows. It's like the Apex action in a Salesforce flow. The data available is going to depend on the design of that invocable action. And what's cool about it is it will support HTML values from account engagement. So here's a little example of what it looks like. We're going to send a webhook to Zapier, and you can see we have our webhook. We're going to add our query string at the end of that. It's going to be question mark. Email is going to be recipient.email. First name would be recipient.first name. So the idea is you can send all of that information to whatever service that you're creating. At this point with engagement program, you do have to type these in manually. So it's not going to just pull up all of your fields like other dynamic fields when you're building out an email or something like that, for example. So you do have to remember what your custom fields that you want to send are going to be. But yeah, like in this case, we can send over the email so that Zapier can process it. All right, so we went over creating and configuring a new marketing app, and now we'll show oops, I didn't update that correctly. We'll show what the Webhooks by Cypress is going to do when we run it here. Okay, so if we jump back into Pardot, we've got this engagement studio example that's set up. And as you can see, we've got a start list, and then we've got these external actions here. Now, we've done a few tests already. But the idea is you can see here with the invocable class that we're using, the Webhooks by Cypress, we've got a single URL. Depending on what other developers are out there building, you might see more than just a single URL. We wanted to make this really simple. And all we're going to do is send to this Zapier endpoint. If you're not familiar with what Zapier is, you create zaps in a tool, in the Zapier tool. We're going to say catch a raw webhook. Zapier creates the webhook URL. So I've just copied it from here into our engagement program. And then at the tail end of this, again, I'm just adding my query string. With the webhook, I want to make sure that we're sending over an email variable, first name variable, and I believe I send over a last name variable as well, and then a phone number if we have it. So what it's going to do, depending on the prospect that's going through the program, account engagement is going to be smart enough to know the right recipient, and then we can send that recipient data to your external action. One of the things that I know that they are working on that should be in a future release is the ability to test these. One of the complicated parts right now, one of the tricky things is testing. It's kind of like if you've been on Pardot for a long time, before you had the ability to do testing directly in Pardot, you have to manually test your programs. They were called drip campaigns back then. The status of these external actions is kind of the same way. So you have to test them. So to demo what it's going to look like, I'm just going to send directly to the webhook right here from a web browser. The idea is this is copying exactly what would happen when someone hits that step inside of that engagement program. So boom, we hit go. We have a success inside of Zapier. We can go in here and we can take a look at the Zap runs. We should have a new one now. Here it is at 10:31 my time. So if we click in here, we'll see that Zapier accepted our webhook, and it's able to find the email, the first name, a bunch of other stuff that Zapier collects. And all I'm having this Zap do right now is send me an email to confirm that I received the information. What I also do in this Zapier, now this is not recommended, but I'm doing it just as a test, is what I wanted to do in my example here was test, an external action going out to Zapier in this case. And then, so it sends an email. And then what I'm doing is I actually fake the Pardot command back in. Not the most secure way to do it. So I would not do this for a client, but it's okay in a test environment. So we generate the OAuth that's needed, and then we use webhooks to post back to our Pardot version 5. So you can see in this one, I'm doing a webhooks post to our Pardot API version 5. In the data, so the payload type is a JSON. I'm sending it to the correct extension, Webhooks by Cypress, to the specific activity type. We have to include an email, so that's going to include my name. This way it's Jermaine's, but that's okay. And then I just passed through some values in this flow. So in this one, I wanted to know what the IP address was, and then the first name of the query string. So what we should have here, if we go back to the prospect record in Pardot, sometimes I don't like it when we refresh directly there. We'll take a look at this guy, Brandon. And what we should see in our external activities is that external activity that we just sent. So you can see in that case, an external activity was created outside of Pardot. It posted to that Pardot extensions API, and you can see we have a new external activity with the IP address, and then the first name I provided was Hello Tampa. And that's the demo. That's all I've got. Hopefully it was helpful.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brandon. This is you. It's the external actions are and activities are still kind of, in my opinion, probably more complicated than they maybe should be. But it's my impression that, based on just conversations I've been a part of and calls I've been on, that they're kind of hoping that providers like Cypress and others see it as kind of an opportunity to kind of simplify a otherwise pretty complicated, for someone who doesn't live and breathe in APIs and JSON and stuff like that, trying to peel back the layers of complexity via a solution of some kind, kind of leaning on the partner ecosystem, the ISVs, to come in and develop a solution that will work well with the foundation that they've laid. Um, I'm hopeful that more and more will come through, because kind of on the surface, unless you it, it's there are not as I think there are not as many end customer users as maybe Pardot thinks that have access to a developer that can just go in and create a invocable action that can go and do all these things. It's something that requires, in my opinion, a pretty deep level of, far more than surface level, like beyond
Yeah,
what a standard,
beyond what
even
a
what an admin.
marketer, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, marketer, yeah, or even a Salesforce admin. It's very much developer level stuff. You have to
Hmm.
understand, you know, like if you're creating an external action, you have to understand what an invocable class is and how to create it, and have to have all these test classes and things like that to get it to work. And then for the external activities piece, you have to understand how Pardot's API works as well. And yeah,
Hmm.
most marketers don't have that in their tool case. So I think you're spot on. One of the things why we created the webhooks package is the idea of, okay, well, if you can send to a service like Zapier, that should make things a lot easier for most people.
Yeah.
It even becomes technical, it even becomes more on the technical side. Even just sending to a Zap can
Hmm.
be more technical. So I think, yeah, hopefully down the road, providers like Zoom, other webinar tools will see value to create packages that support this. So that way, all you'd have to do is go and install the Zoom package, and now you've got your external actions, or some video tool, whatever it might be.
Yeah. There are a couple questions in here. So there were. So let's see. Louisa asked, "Do these external activities show up in engagement history in Salesforce, in the Salesforce side, like Pardot activities do today?"
You know what? Actually, let me double check that. I don't think they do. Let me double check that. Unless you know the answer, Ben, right
I
off the
don't.
bat. Let me just take a look at a lead record. So if you're looking at the engagement history lightning component, I'm looking at it right now, and I'm not going to share that because it does have my personal information. I'm sure we're all friendly people, but
Mm-hmm.
what I'm looking at in the engagement history lightning component on the Salesforce side is only the standard engagement history stuff. I'm not seeing the external activities included in that.
Okay, and that doesn't surprise me. There's usually like that's usually like a next like, oh, and now we've that's like a they kind of will say, oh, now we've made it available for Salesforce, but it's like it's steps. It's like we're not quite there
Yeah.
yet, which is kind of a bummer. But another question is, can you discuss how to use webhooks without a dependency on third-party apps briefly, i.e., resources?
Um, So the idea behind a webhooks feature is um, think of it as a very simplified way to leverage APIs. I think a really great example of a webhook is a Pardot form handler. So the idea is when someone submits a form, they hit a button that's actually doing a post to a webhook, and our Pardot form handlers end up becoming API endpoints. So typically, when we're dealing with a webhook, we're sending information to some server somewhere. Um, I guess maybe when they say resources, I'm wondering if we can get some more clarity on what they mean by resources. Typically, what lives behind a webhook is some server somewhere that's accepting data, whether that's through a query string or a JSON or something. Um, but yeah, maybe with some clarity, I'll try to answer that better.
Yeah, looks like so Brian asked a question. So he's learning more about webhooks and creating them is what he's basically what he's saying. So um
Gotcha.
yeah, so okay. Well, it doesn't look like there's any more questions. I guess the last thing is if there's because this is obviously kind of a pretty heady topic. So if you have any recommendations for somebody who's trying to get their head around even just like the basics of like like webhooks or like invocable actions or like the kind of the foundation of this stuff, where would you is there anything that you would recommend someone kind of trying to start out who has like the foundational knowledge of Pardot and they were asked to, okay, we need to start working out these invocable these external actions and activities and all that. um, is there like a starting place that you would recommend someone kind of getting their head around where they how where they how they should start, where they need to start?
Yeah, specifically if webhooks work better, play with form handlers. Learn all the tricky, fun things you can do with your Pardot form handlers, because those are effectively webhooks. And I know for me, once this was a while back, I made the connection like, oh, you know what? Pardot form handlers are kind of like webhooks in a way where you could send stuff into Pardot through these form handlers and it would treat it in a very similar way as like doing the Pardot upsert prospect thing without having to go through all the upsert prospect stuff. Another good thing to look at, like if you really want to go under the hood, take a look at a Salesforce web delete. And the Salesforce web delete, you'll see the first line of that is the post action, and then there'll be Salesforce's flavor of a webhook. And then I think that really helps understand what webhooks are. Then from there you'll understand webhooks as a foundation of how a lot of APIs can work as your endpoints. Then you'll see, okay, some webhooks you'll need to send like a JSON formatted request or XML formatted request. But what's nice about the form handler ones is they work on a query string. So what that looks like is you'll send it a request that is something like, I'll type an example in here. go.pardot.com/form handler. You have your query string, email equals Brandon at Cypress Learning. And that would be the example of a query string based webhook. And then you realize, like, oh, you know what? I can send data from one system over here, one place over here to another place, depending on that endpoint. And then from there, it gets complex. Like you need to have certain authentication that comes with it. But I think that's a good starting point, just to understand the idea of, okay, you're sending information from one server to another server using a URL.
Okay.
Hopefully that wasn't too heavy.
No, absolutely.
Hopefully
That's
that
great. I
explains
appreciate it.
it.
All right. Well, I don't think there's anything else. So feel free to connect with Brandon on the Twitter and LinkedIn, and check out Cypress. Um, Brandon's going to be a part of something else that's happening next month. So keep an eye out for that. It's for the Pardot consultant exam. There's a series that we'll be doing that will you'll start hearing more about in the coming days and weeks. So thank you, Brandon, for walking through that. And the recording will be, I'm going to put the recording on both on the event, and then I will also uh, publish it on a Pardot Geeks blog post. So
Awesome.
both those will be there.
One more thing I'll add before we wrap here also is, if you're on YouTube and you look up the Cypress Learning Solutions channel, we do post content there as well. So if you go there, you'll see me doing a similar presentation to this, where we go over the webhooks and demo it there. And as we come up with new things and find out things that are worth sharing on YouTube, we like to post there semi-frequently.
Yeah,
That'd be
awesome.
another place to get resources.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for who's able to join. And keep an eye out for the recording. And have a good rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are. Thanks again, Brandon.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks,
All
Ben.
right. See you guys later. Bye bye.
See ya.